Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 1970s Montauk Project. The dark sequel to the Philadelphia experiment, from naval ghost ships to Long Island time tunnels. If the Philadelphia experiment of 1943 laid the esoteric foundation for mid-century military conspiracy lore, the Montauk Project of the 1970s and 1980s served as its chaotic, sprawling sequel. Set against the windswept backdrop of the abandoned Camp Hero Air Force Station at the eastern tip of Long Island, New York, the Montauk legend took the quantum and interdimensional theories of the wartime naval myth and pushed them into absolute psychological and science-fictional overdrive. To understand the mythos, one must look at the real-world location that inspired it. Camp Hero was a genuine U.S. Army and Air Force installation, established during World War II and expanded during the Cold War to defend the eastern seaboard from potential enemy aircraft and submarine incursions. Its most striking feature was, and remains, a massive concrete semi-automatic ground environment, SAGE radar tower, which bore a distinct resemblance to a giant architectural monolith or antenna. Like many mid-century military installations, Camp Hero featured extensive multi-level subterranean bunkers, cable conduits, and rooms built deep into the bluffs overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. When the military officially decommissioned and abandoned the site in the late 1960s, these empty underground facilities became a blank canvas for local rumors, trespassers, and underground lore. The narrative bridge connecting the 1943 naval myth of Philadelphia to the underground techno-thriller of Long Island represents one of the most elaborate world-building exercises in modern conspiracy lore. Rather than treating these events as isolated anomalies, alternative historians constructed a continuous multi-decade Black Project timeline where military science relentlessly escalated its assault on the laws of physics. In the mythology popularized by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon in their 1992 foundational text, The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, published by Skybooks, the catastrophic failure of the USS Eldridge test did not cause the U.S. government to abandon space-time manipulation. Instead, it forced the Enterprise underground. According to the lore, the theoretical physicists, naval engineers, and military handlers who survived or managed the fallout of the Philadelphia experiment were quietly funneled into a long-term, highly classified initiative. As Cold War tensions escalated and military-industrial funding surged, these researchers were eventually relocated to the remote, heavily fortified subterranean infrastructure beneath Camp Hero. Here, away from public view and shielded by national security secrecy, they could resume their work without the risk of public exposure or accidental catastrophe. The narrative architecture asserts that the decades separating the 1940s and the 1970s marked a staggering evolutionary leap in military research capabilities. While the Philadelphia experiment relied on heavy copper degaussing coils and primitive electrical generators, the Montauk researchers allegedly repurposed the massive, high-frequency SAGE radar transmitter as an ultra-powerful directed energy weapon and spatial modulator. Armed with advanced post-war computing technology and captured exotic hardware, the project allegedly moved far beyond the superficial goal of making a steel hull invisible to radar. The scientists at Montauk were framed as having cracked the ultimate code of reality, manipulating human consciousness through psychotronics, punching stable wormholes for time travel, and opening interdimensional portals capable of bridging parallel universes. By welding the Philadelphia experiment directly to the Montauk Project, alternative researchers created a self-sustaining mythology, transforming a localized maritime ghost story into a sprawling, multi-generational conspiracy epic, suggesting that the invisible destroyer escort of 1943 was merely the crude first draft of a terrifying ongoing war against the boundaries of time and space. The transformation of an abandoned Cold War radar station on the windy bluffs of Long Island into a legendary nexus of time travel, psychic espionage, and government conspiracies did not happen by accident. It was the result of a deliberate, highly imaginative partnership between two men who merged pseudoscience, esoteric philosophy, and the latent gate of 20th century obsession with recovered memories into a literary phenomenon. At the literal and narrative center of the Montauk, Mythos was Preston Nichols, an electrical engineer and self-described parapsychologist, whose personal narrative provided the raw, pseudoscientific framework for the entire enterprise. In the early 1990s, Nichols stepped forward with a sensational story. He claimed that while working in the area, he had completely suppressed decades of active duty service at the secret underground facilities beneath Camp Hero. According to Nichols, his memories began to spontaneously resurface through a process of mental unblocking. He remembered serving as a key scientist, engineer, and project director for deeply classified mind control, psychotronic amplification, and time travel operations. By framing his wild claims not as creative writing, but as recovered memories of trauma and state-sponsored secrecy, Nichols insulated his stories with a chilling confessional aura. While Nichols supplied the supposed first-hand memories, the legend required a structured voice and a commercial vehicle to reach an audience. That role was filled by Peter Moon, born Vincent Barbaric, an author, researcher, and publisher, deeply entrenched in esoteric literature, synchromysticism, and alternative history. Moon met Nichols and immediately recognized the explosive commercial potential of his stories. Where Nichols had raw, rambling anecdotes about psychic chairs and radar transmitters, Moon possessed the narrative craft to shape them into a cohesive, readable manuscript. Operating through his imprint, Sky Books, Moon curated, edited, and published the material, ensuring it captured the exact paranoid speculative zeitgeist of the early 1990s counterculture. The culmination of their partnership arrived in 1992 with the release of the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time. The book codified the mythology, weaving together real-world historical touchstones such as the Sage Radar Tower, actual subterranean bunkers at Camp Hero, and genuine public suspicion surrounding CIA MK-Ultra mind control experiments, with pure science fiction tropes like time tunnels and dimensional portals. Demonstrating a brilliant grasp of narrative self-defense, Moon and Nichols included a subtle caveat in the opening pages of their book, suggesting readers could take the text as either nonfiction or science fiction. This clever hedge allowed them to present their claims as absolute truth to believers, while retaining plausible deniability against legal or intellectual ridicule. This foundational text was followed by a whole series of sequels, including Montauk Revisited, Adventures in Synchronicity, and Pyramids of Montauk. Adding another layer to the phenomenon was Al Bielek, who became its loudest evangelist on the lecture circuit. Bielek claimed that he wasn't just involved in the Montauk Project, but that he was also a survivor of the 1943 Philadelphia experiment, who had physically time-traveled from 1943 to the future. Spent time at Montauk in the 1970s and 80s, and then had his memories wiped and dumped back into different timeline. His dramatic, utterly unverified lectures crisscrossed the country throughout the 1990s, cementing the bridge between the Philadelphia naval myth and the Long Island base. Before Nichols and Moon wrote their book, Camp Hero in Montauk was just an abandoned, windswept Cold War radar station that local teenagers and ghost hunters liked to trespass in. They took real-world elements and wove them together using the pseudoscientific framing of recovered memories. Despite their subtle disclaimer that readers were in for an amazing story, alternative history subcultures embraced it as absolute fact, transforming a pair of fringe authors' imaginative paperback into modern folklore. The Montauk legend achieved its legendary status within alternative history hang circles, not merely because it claimed to continue the work of the Philadelphia experiment, but because it aggressively synthesized nearly every major subgenre of late negative 20th century high strangeness into a single narrative framework. At the apex of the Montauk technological mythology lies the mastery and ultimate catastrophe of temporal manipulation. The legend claims that by 1983, the researchers at Camp Hero had successfully calibrated the massive Sage radar installation to generate a controlled, stable wormhole or time tunnel. This vortex was allegedly used to peer into and physically access various eras of Earth's history, most famously establishing a direct energetic and physical bridge back to the exact deck of the USS Eldridge during its legendary 1943 phase shift test. Rather than relying purely on mechanical generators, the Montauk Project narrative introduces a chilling fusion of advanced technology and human biology. heavily mirroring real-world historical atrocities like the CIA's ZMK Ultra program. The lore asserts that scientists integrated advanced computer hardware with a specialized, custom-built chair capable of reading, amplifying, and projecting human brainwaves. Young, psychologically sensitive subjects, dubbed the Montauk Boys, were reportedly rounded up and placed into this chair, where facility-generated electromagnetic fields forced them to perform remote viewing, materialize solid objects out of thin air, and project their consciousness across vast stretches of space and time. Perhaps the most bizarre and psychologically revealing element of the mythos is the tale of its catastrophic collapse. According to the accounts popularized by Preston Nichols, a key psychic participant began broadcasting intense, repressed psychological turmoil or raw anger while sitting in the psychotronic amplifier chair. Because the equipment was designed to turn pure thought into objective reality, the subject's subconscious trauma allegedly manifested a literal physical monster, a shambling, hairy, destructive beast, inside the sterile underground tunnels of Camp Hero. The entity ran amok through the facility, smashing equipment and wreaking havoc until panicked technicians or operators violently destroyed or unplugged the chair to break the feedback loop. Long before streaming platforms and science fiction writers began populating the subterranean tunnels of Long Island with government-bred horrors, the coastal town of Montauk delivered a flesh and blood mystery that briefly paralyzed the internet. In July 2008, a strange, bloated, hairless carcass washed ashore on Ditch Plains Beach, launching a media frenzy that forever fused the windswept tip of Long Island with the enduring mythology of biological monstrosity. The appearance of the creature was nothing short of grotesque. Possessing a stocky body, visible canines, and a bizarre, protruding snout that bore an uncanny resemblance to a bird's beak, the dead animal looked like a refugee from a mad scientist's laboratory. Almost overnight, the internet dubbed it the Montauk Monster, and the public imagination did what it always does when faced with the unexplainable. It pointed an accusing finger at the nearest bastion of state secrecy. Located just off the coast of Long Island sat the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, a high-security federal facility. To a public already marinated in decades of Cold War paranoia and urban legends about the Montauk Project, the coincidence was too sweet to ignore, prompting tabloids and online sleuths to brand the carcass a failed genetic hybrid from a government breeding program. Yet, reality proved far less cinematic. Zoologists and biologists quickly stepped in to pour cold water on the sci-fi hysteria, identifying the carcass as an ordinary raccoon. Long exposure to seawater, bloating, and advanced decomposition had stripped away the animal's fur and dissolved its facial tissues, leaving behind a bare skull and upper jaw structure that mimicked a beak. By the time the mysterious carcass conveniently vanished into the media ether, the scientific truth had already lost the race to a much juicier myth. The brief phenomenon revealed the deep cultural resonance of the region. Dead raccoon on an ordinary beach would have gone unnoticed anywhere else, but in Montauk it became a canvas for collective anxiety, proving that we secretly hope someone is playing God in the dark. Let's be entirely honest. If you were to walk up to any self-respecting investigative journalist, military historian, or sane individual and ask about the Montauk Project, they would look at you with a gentle, pitying gaze usually reserved for people who try to pay their taxes in Chuck E. Cheese tokens. After all, investigators and former military personnel have debunked the whole thing 1,000 times over. It turns out that an abandoned Air Force station on the windy tip of Long Island wasn't actually a subterranean lair where rogue scientists built time tunnels, tortured psychic kids, or accidentally summoned furry subconscious monsters from another dimension. Instead, the legend is just a delightfully unhinged cocktail of local ghost stories, sci-fi paperbacks, and the wildly creative imaginations of gentlemen named Preston Nichols and Al Bielek, who apparently looked at a rusted radar dish and thought, you know what this needs? Interdimensional portal hopping. And yet, despite being completely, laughably fictitious, the Montauk Project refuses to die. In fact, its cultural footprint is so massive that it accidentally gave birth to modern pop culture royalty. If you have ever binge-watched Netflix's Stranger Things, a show that was actually developed under the working title Montauk, You have willingly checked into the very same psychic research ward these guys dreamed up over a few too many beers. Ultimately, the Montauk Project is the magnificent spiritual evolution of the Philadelphia experiment. It stands as a brilliant testament to human creativity. Proof that you don't need boring old facts when you have an abandoned military radar tower, a whole lot of Cold War paranoia, and an unquenchable desire to believe that the government is hiding a time-traveling monster right next to the Hamptons. When we trace the lineage of the Philadelphia experiment to its chaotic successor, the Montauk Project, we are inevitably forced to ask a deeper, more unsettling question about the human mind. How is it that human consciousness is so exquisitely tuned to generate, absorb, and fiercely believe in such elaborate, high-stakes narratives? This modern impulse to map out secret space programs, hidden government conspiracies, and interdimensional portals feels strikingly similar to the contemporary lore shared by modern experiences and UFO abductees. It raises a fundamental philosophical and neurological puzzle. Are these vast, intricate mythologies simply products of the human subconscious? Are they crafted by a brain attempting to interpret internal neurological anomalies, sensory feedback loops, or sensory misfires through dramatic metaphor? After all, everything we experience is mediated through the physical theater of the brain. Outside of human perception, how can humanity ever objectively comprehend the raw universe? Everything we know is captured and processed internally. Yet, when we look closer at the world of modern experiencers and former abductees, the boundary between pure psychological illusion and tangible physical reality blurs in fascinating ways. This intersection of mind and anomaly drew the attention of high-level academic researchers, most famously the late Dr. John E. Mack, a Pulitzer Prize-winning psychiatrist and tenured professor at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Mack risked his professional standing and prestige to study individuals who claimed direct contact with non-human intelligences. Rather than dismissing these accounts out of hand as baseline psychosis or delusion, he approached his subjects as a true investigator, seeking deeper truths about human consciousness. While fringe theories sometimes overstate neurological specifics, such as claims regarding physical mutations in the amygdala, Mack's core inquiry was revolutionary. He suggested that the experiencer phenomenon could not be flattened into simple medical pathology. Instead, he treated it as an authentic, profound mystery of the human psyche interacting with dimensions of reality we are only beginning to fathom. Ultimately, whether these stories originate from secret military black projects, science fiction paperbacks, or the deep unexplored corridors of our own neural architecture, they reveal something profound about us. We live on the edge of an immense and different cosmos, and our brains are constantly building bridges, sometimes terrifying, sometimes magnificent, to span the gap between what we know and what we desperately wish to understand. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archived Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.